See, if you plug the bitch in and you just sit it down and you go upstairs and you come downstairs, you feel like you done lost your motherfucking mind like 8 hours later. And you're like, I didn't leave this bitch on.
You're gonna play the game, the PlayStation all day with the Metal Gear Solid.
Xbox One, you know, good system, relatively speaking, right? But like one of the biggest selling points of it now, especially if you see it in action, is voice commands. Like you can tell that motherfucker was created with the idea that you're going to talk to it all the time.
Yeah.
Like all the time. Like the menu is like a bastardized version of Windows 8. Mm-hmm. And you have to like go in and out of menus and do stuff. Like it takes you like, you gotta go through like 2 menus or 3 menus and they're like fucking play a game. Or you can say Xbox, play whatever.
Yeah,
right?
Kind of like how Jelly Bean works.
I mean, it's literally like the only way it's remotely streamlined is if you use the voice commands. Mm-hmm. And that's neat, but I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to talk to my fucking box all the time. You know, I don't, I mean, I know that's the future, but I feel like a giant tool bag when I walk into a room if I was to be like, Xbox, watch Walking Dead, Season 3, Episode 4. No, I'd much rather just use a controller or a remote.
I feel that if the prompt command wasn't Xbox, it would feel less awkward.
I agree. If you just like said watch so and so, or you know,
well, you've got to say something so that it identifies that you're talking to it. But if it just felt more natural instead of like identification piece, and then whatever you're trying to do. But then again, how does that work with files that aren't set up for the voice activate? I don't know.
Well, I mean, not only just that, but it all like. And see, the thing is, they got all these features that kind of, sort of, like, all right, from one, it has like skeletal recognition, which is a fancy way of saying when you walk into a room, the camera, the Kinect sees you and knows you're you.
Yeah.
And not your girlfriend or child or whatever.
And it sees your penis, too.
And, you know, the idea behind that is that you can set it so you can walk into a room and it will turn on and go immediately right to your profile.
Yeah.
Which works, sort of, from what I understand. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Like, as in, sometimes your girlfriend will walk in and it'll think you're you. And that's not you.
That'll probably be fixed after some firmware updates.
And also, it's not really good if you sit in weird positions, you know?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's all that stuff has. But see, like, I don't know. I'm not to the point where I would just feel funny as hell having to talk to my machine. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I don't know.
No, I feel that the...
Oh no, I get angry enough when I call one of those fucking automated voice lines that have decided to do away with the press 1, press 2, where you have to say shit.
Yeah.
I'm like motherfucker, just let me hit a button, because 9 times out of 10 you don't understand what
you.
the
Did
fuck
you say
I said.
yes?
Please tell us what your issue is. Like, okay, you're not going to give me a list, so you want me to enumerate my issue to you.
The thing that irritates me is you've got... The Kinect is a really good system, and the camera and all that stuff. I just feel that they have implemented it to the public way sooner than they should have. I think it should have gone to, like, I don't know, medical usage in surgery rooms or something first. Like, that's who it should have been sold to first, instead of, like, let's put this in everyone's house and make everyone feel really uncomfortable.
Not really. When you think about it, video gamers, you basically have essentially millions of beta testers for your product.
Well, true.
And then you just don't tell them they're beta testing the product. You make them pay for it, and then you constantly fix the broken problems with it and the issues, and you have to constantly update it. It's essentially like when now MMOs online do the same shit. They're like, hey, we're out of we're in open beta instead of closed beta, but we're gonna open up the shop so you can still spend money with us, but any complaints you have about the game being buggy or broken or anything,
Beta.
we're just going to keep pointing back to the fact that it's a beta, and we're going to keep it here for like a year and a half while we rake in your money. All right. Like, I mean, that's essentially what technologies like the Kinect and shit are now. They give it to millions of people who won't mind that it's buggy because it's a new way for them to play fucking NASCAR 2014. And then when the technology's been made better, then it can be sold to doctors. Because honestly, I don't want my doctor doing brain surgery and he's like, make an incision on that lobe. And the thing's like, did you want to cut his fucking face off? Okay. Yeah, no, I don't want that.
No,
that shit needs to be perfected before you give it to doctors.
You're thinking about that wrong. I'm not talking about like controlling a device of some. Well, not controlling a like a surgery device. I'm talking about like, okay, let's since they can't touch anything, being able to bring up files and records and X-rays and things like that quickly with just doing hand motions and talking would be a lot better instead of having someone standing there trying to hold something up. And because you've got about 6-7 people in that operating room and then like 2 backups for that.
A lot of places are already like swapping over things to iPads and shit like that, like, you know, showing you your forms and stuff on an iPad. Like I have a feeling the medical profession tends to grab technology they know is going to stick. And instead of just like every new thing, oh hey, let's invest a bunch of money on getting everybody Xbox Connect to use this tech. Oh wow, and it's been abandoned.
Well, I know because
the iPad's probably not going anywhere for a while. So
No.
that's a safe bet for them.
Well, I saw something on the alternate uses of the Kinects when it first came out because the Kinect was an interesting device. I feel it's stupid for a video game. Then again, the dance game works.
Well, that was the problem. Is like the Kinect, right? There's no killer apps for it, and there never will be, in my opinion, because it's a gimmick.
Yeah.
I mean that's all it is. I mean, whether you like that or not is up to you. But I mean, it's a gimmick. I mean, it's not. They don't have the technology for it to be accurate enough, consistent enough, and for you want to play it long enough period of time to be useful outside of a handful of certain game types.
Right.
You know. Dance Revolution or whatever, that's great.
Yeah, that was
but
a brilliant idea.
You're never gonna fucking use a Kinect to play fucking Uncharted.
No.
You know what I'm saying? Or whatever.
Then again, you remember that movie Gamer? That was kind of like a Super Kinect. But I've seen the ultimate application.
I wouldn't want to play a game like Uncharted on the Kinect either, just to like point that part of the equation out.
What do you mean I gotta run in place?
My fat ass doesn't want to run through temples and shit. That's why I have a controller to make him do it for me.
Right. I'm lazy.
I mean, yeah, I get that we need to find ways to inspire fitness, but like some of the shit you would have to do for some of these games is just that like people just wouldn't play them. They'd be like, okay, fuck it. I don't need to know what happens to Drake in Part 12. Fuck it.
And ironically enough, that was one of the things that I saw, I shit you not, one of the reviews that said why the Xbox was going to win. It was much better than the PlayStation 4 was the Kinect and the fact that it could turn, it made it a physical activity to play games. I shit you not. Like that is the bonus.
We already did that, and they proved that while that audience exists, that audience isn't playing the games that come to the Xbox.
And
generally.
they're only playing one game. You're right.
There's a lot of like Wii Fitness, Wii Sports. There's a shit ton of Wii games that people play and they get physical with. The problem is that audience isn't the audience that's like playing Resident Evil, and even if it is, they would tell you that they probably don't want to play Resident Evil that way.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
and,
you know.
And
I
we're
absolutely
also
love the idea of playing Wii Fitness the way that it's meant to be played, but I would not want to play a Final Fantasy game with motion controllers or with the Kinect. It would suck.
Motion controllers I'm okay with if the game is kind of built for it. Like Heavy Rain wound up being really good with the with motion controllers, but
See, I don't. I mean, But Heavy Rain's barely a game. What were you motion controlling in that? Was it just like choosing options, just
No,
like a mouse, basically?
Pretty
Is that what you
much.
It's
That's pretty
reaction
much
time.
exactly what it is.
It's reaction. So you'd be set up with a challenge, and based off of whether or not you've achieved the challenge is whether or not that character dies. But since it's all
No,
reaction based,
I didn't ask you how the game is played. I asked how the motion controls made it
well,
awesome.
it made it better. I don't know exactly how to explain that.
But I mean, what changed when you use motion controls? Tell me.
Well,
I want to know.
instead of pressing a button, it would be like a hand motion. And if
Yeah,
you
no,
failed
that's
on the
hilarious.
hand motion,
I watched Aaron and Skylar play it for about two hours one night, and the sacrifice you're making is that instead of being able to use the fucking joystick and a button to do something, you have to like figure out how to make it look like you're masturbating the controller to like shave, for instance. I think is one of the activities that they spent so much time like figuring out how to do. Like it's just
it's the opening piece.
Basically, see, West is impressed by it. You and I are not impressed by it because we're able to see it for what it is. It's a gimmick to add depth to the game because it detracts from the fact that Heavy Rain, while still good and while still revolutionary, is not a traditional video game. Mm-hmm. And the way to distract from that is to like wrap it up in an extra layer of intricacy.
Well, no, you're okay. So you're saying that I don't see that? Or is the issue that even though I know that that's going on, I enjoy that?
I just the problem I'm having is I'm trying to see why that's beneficial to your playing experience.
It's not. It adds an extra layer to make the game feel more like a game.
I mean, I don't. That's my thing is I can't see how that's.
I would say what I would say is try playing the game with your
because otherwise there would be like
controller.
no challenge to Heavy Rain.
Play the game with the traditional controller and then play it with the motion controller. That's what I did.
That would first off we have an issue there because that would require me playing Heavy Rain and then having to play it again, and that's just fucking definitely not going to happen.
It's good.
At all.
It's good.
I have movies I can watch. I mean, they don't.
You don't have to play the whole game. You can play like 30 minutes with the controller and then swap over to the Move controller for 30 minutes.
Not to mention there's a downloadable demo.
Hey, I have bandwidth caps. I don't.
Do you want to borrow Heavy Rain?
Like I love the delicious
Not really.
delicious irony of Sony like picking on Nintendo on the Wii and like calling it basically a fucking lollipop, saying that it has no substance whatsoever, and then when they release their fucking controller, it looks like a lollipop.
There was one game that came out on the Move that was really good, and I don't know what happened, like why it feels like it got dropped, or the concept got dropped, but it was called Sorcery. You guys ever hear about it?
You like cast spells or some shit, right?
Yeah, you were a little sorcerer's apprentice or something. But that game was built really well, and it was
But see,
built
all
to
that
utilize
again,
the
all that
move.
is like, all right, it was motions to cast spells. So it's literally just making you move your hand instead of moving the analog control stick in the same circular motions. It hasn't changed any gameplay. It's just it's trying to make you have a deeper connection by saying, "Oh, look, you're literally having to move your body to perform the actions." And
Or like the J.K. Rowling Book of Spells. That's one of the ways you can get the motion controllers. You can go buy the Book of Spells game, and it like comes with the move.
Oh, that's right. Book of Spells thing.
But yeah, I mean it doesn't
It's
add
a gimmick.
anything. It doesn't add. Yeah, it's a gimmick because it doesn't actually add anything to the gameplay. It just changes the nature of the input.
But I don't.
And not even in a way that makes it easier. You could argue that touchscreen technology has made computing easier if you're able to adjust to it. You can't really make that same argument for most motion-based games because in a lot of cases, you're taking a generation of people who have grown up with controllers and you're giving them shit that's harder to use.
Is it a bad thing though?
I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying that it literally adds zero to the equation. Until you can make a game that just relies on that is impossible for you to play with a controller because it's so intricate that it needs to calculate your every move Like
You
until you
brought
make
up
it like that,
brought up
it doesn't
gamer as an example, Wes. When they have something that actually operates like like the movie Gamer, then those controls will be something you need. Then they'll be acceptable because you literally feel yourself as being inside of the game. But right now, when I'm still looking at something on the TV, and all I'm doing is literally changing, instead of moving my hand on the controller, I'm having to wave around in front of my face like I'm having a fucking epileptic seizure.
Well, how many of the motion games have you played?
How many of the motion games have I played? I played all the Wii shit for the most part, which, let's be honest, is probably the
Tennis.
pinnacle of motion from the last generation because the Kinect fucking was inaccurate as fuck.
Mm-hmm.
I played around for a Kinect for just a minute when somebody had one set up. They're just, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I know for a fact the new Kinect is a lot better.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like amazingly better.
Yeah.
But it's still not something I want to mess with. It just doesn't.
Oh yeah, I mean,
There's no
none of
killer
that
app for it. There's never will
None
be.
of that stuff. None of that stuff is precise enough for me to touch on one of the little things you mentioned. Is that it's just not accurate. It's not accurate. I would rather have a controller where I know I can whack someone's fucking head off with a sword with pinpoint accuracy, as opposed to like, oh, I swing and I wished because like fucking there's a glare and it messed up where the laser connected with the fucking like. No, I just no.
Well, yeah. What move ones have you played?
Like, ironically, the only move game that I wanted to play was a Kickstarter, and I don't even know if that guy actually managed to finish his Kickstarter or not. It was a guy that had a Kickstarter to design a game to teach you how to sword play, because he was a swordsman. Like he knows like all kinds of different sword fighting techniques with different types of weapons. And part of the Kickstarter was like, look how stupid video games are. They like have people using swords and then they're using them incorrectly. Like, I can teach you how to use swords correctly. Teach you how to use long blades versus things like rapiers and shit like that. Like he had a really cool like Kickstarter for it, and I don't know what happened to it because I checked up on it. But that I would have played, because that is a game that's designed specifically for move controller. You would get nothing out of it. You would learn nothing by playing with a controller.
I'll give you, for instance, when it comes to something like that. Okay. What the fuck is it called? Rocksmith, right?
Yeah.
Rocksmith, that's an example. And given they don't even want you to think of it as a game, they want you to think of it as a learning tool now. They've completely stopped being referred to it as a game. All right, the controller on that is technically a guitar. You could not have that game without having an alternate controller, the real guitar. I mean, it's because it's teaching you how to play.
Right.
Yeah, that I'll buy. But like, all right, and another example, all right, the Guitar Hero games, right? You had to have the special controller. Why? Because you can play them on a controller pad, but it completely changes and makes the experience not worth participating in.
Right.
Right. I don't see as the Kinect and the Move controllers do that yet. All they do is literally offer an alternate, normally not as good way to control a game you could already play. Outside of stuff like the Wii. Like the Wii Sports and shit like that a lot of times, they actually work because they're so simple. That's the reason why they work.
And they're again, most of those Wii Sports and shit are designed for the motion play. They're not designed for a controller. So much of the shit for the Move and so much of the shit for the Kinect is designed to be played with either. That when you design the game to be played with either controller, like the movement version is always going to be the weakest one, because you have to design it for those buttons first. Those buttons have to have a purpose.
Do both of you guys have Move?
No, I don't. There was what the fuck would I have used it with?
Yeah, I mean, the like four decent games out there that are Move compatible, and like most of them I can play with a controller.
Which I don't have to worry about it now, because they added the damn Move controller into the normal PlayStation 4 DualShock now. It's part of it. That's what that little light on the front of it's for.
Ah, did not know that. Well, I was gonna say, if you guys have it, go pick up Sorcery and give that a play. Game's good. You can get it for like $15, $20. I disagree. I disagree because just because you're playing a game with a different input method doesn't change or doesn't make the game less playable. If anything,
That's not what we said at all.
but
We just said it doesn't add anything to that experience, especially not when they're designed to be played with a controller or a Move controller.
I would say that it does. Depending on the game. Not all the games translate very well.
Okay, see, with the Wii games, you can argue that the sport ones are designed to give you some level of exercise, but something like fucking Navy SEALs 12 or some shit, I mean, that doesn't give you exercise, it just makes you look like a complete jackass in your own living room. I mean, it doesn't add anything to the experience, really. I mean, other than you being able to pretend to have Nerf wars and not have to have children to be able to justify it, like.
I mean, you know, for instance, I don't know. I guess the best way I could say to think about it, Wes, would be when you play the game, ask yourself, is this the best way to control this game? If this is not the best way to control this game, then you should not be playing it that way.
Because, I mean, look at most of the movement controllers anyway.
Than just because
even the
you want to try
Wii, which
something
the Wii is the Wii is arguably the best way to do it. But look at the Wii, and then look at the PlayStation Move, and then look at the Wii U. Even with all the movement and shit that they've incorporated into it, there's still like 3 fucking peripherals and like 12 buttons you have to press. So all you're doing is you're taking a controller, splitting it into 2 pieces that have to be like wire tethered to fucking together, and then you're pressing buttons while moving your hand and acting like you're having a seizure. Like, I mean, it's overly complicated, something that didn't need to be overly complicated. And then the Wii U adds a layer to that. They're like, here's a fucking tablet. Have a tablet with it too. That'll make it real fun.
Yeah.
And it just like, they're not like, to me, the Kinect is really the way to go once the technology is there and once they design games to be really excellent with it, because if you're gonna get away from the traditional controller, get away from the controller. Don't have me holding like nunchucks and shit. Like, I mean,
you know, buy into it.
Yeah, I don't, because if I still have to
But
press
even
buttons,
they knew they couldn't
if I still have
do
to
it.
press a bunch of buttons, I just want a fucking controller at that point. I don't want a controller I have to wave around like I'm jerking off some invisible dragon. I mean,
I still don't agree with you though. Just because
well,
it's
that's fine. You're not required to agree with us.
Well,
What matters is that, you know, logic dictates that we have a point. We have a very good point. You would have a point if we were like 10 years into the future when the technology is actually decent, but we're not. We're at a place where playing most of these games with the Move controller adds nothing to the experience.
I mean, you know, the best you can say for them, and I'm not going to say there's nothing wrong with this, but, you know, is this a gimmick? You want to do something different, try it a different way, have some shits and giggles, but, you know, until they are the absolute best way to play it, all it is an alternative option that you're playing just to do something different. And that's really, you know, all it's doing. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I mean, you haven't really given a good reason why other than just because.
Oh well, no, I've been listening to you guys talk.
Yeah. Well, give me a good reason why.
Well, number one, I think the experience is better for first-person shooters with the Move, the ones that have been adapted correctly for it. Resistance 3, which I think was the first one, might have been the second one, that was adapted. The game was better, but it was buggy. Because I sat down with the regular controller and then I got the Move with the entire gun piece because they had a full package. And I preferred doing it standing with the whole rifle unit and using that. The only thing that felt awkward was the joystick. Just because of where they placed it, you don't really like hold a gun that way, but from what I could tell, it was the best way that they could have done it. So I'll give that on.
All right, now a first-person shooter, if is the big if,
And
if the
Killzone
controls
3
are
is supposed
accurate
to be
and
better.
precise enough I can see that.
They are.
But the problem I'm having is I haven't seen the controls be accurate and precise enough to be able to
move
do
is
that. I
one-to-one.
know that because those shitty-ass IR games that used to play in the arcade where you had to aim at the screen weren't even fucking, you know.
The move is a 1-to-1. It uses the camera to detect the light situation. You can play the game
Right, I know, but we
without-
had that technology already. It was called fucking Duck Hunt. That's not anything new.
Well, right, but Duck Hunt relied on the reflection of
CRT. It relied on a
Yeah.
CRT monitor. I know what it relied on. But, I mean, but still.
Which is why I can't play my Duck Hunt on my new TV. Makes me sad.
But when you're doing it for a first-person shooter, all right, let me ask you this. How did you move?
I personally didn't move around. It was stand in one area in the living room and
Or
then
do you see
play.
an issue I'm getting at?
No.
How the fuck did you move? The
Uh,
first person,
it-
you don't stand in one spot and just
Well,
shoot
no,
things.
it
You
was-
have to move.
That
Use the joystick.
You
I
use the
imagine.
joystick. Yeah. You use the
All right,
joystick.
well there you go. I mean, you've once again had to compromise, and you're having to use.
Well, there's two parts to the move. You've got the wand, and then you've got the controller. Now, all games use the controller piece or the joystick piece, and some games require two wands. It just depends on what game you're playing and how they've structured it.
And I got that, and there's nothing wrong with that per se. But I'm just saying, it wouldn't be super cool to me to that first-person shooter until there's. I mean, you can't move. You're still having to use a controller. The only thing you're doing is you're trying to take out the shittiness of using an analog stick on a first-person shooter. That's why people play it on computers. They use a mice.
It made aiming easier, and
absolutely, because analog sticks suck for first-person shooters.
Well, right, and point and pull worked out a whole lot better. Not to mention when you've got that whole gun unit, if you buy the one that was built by Sony, they actually structured it with wiring and everything, so these two units kind of plug into it, and then there's additional buttons all over the piece too, so that you can like reload by pressing a button on the bottom. They built a unit to add to that experience, but like I said, I bought it with the game. It was a package deal. It came with a move controller, came with the rifle unit, and it came with the game. So it worked out from my perspective. Like I said, Heavy Rain got better. And Chris is right. Adding another layer to it to make it feel more like a game is probably why it felt better. Because sitting there with a joystick, you're really involved into the storyline and everything, and it's just like, okay, I got to pick something. And you press a button. And that's it. Or you do this little like thumb spasm on your joystick, and then you move on.
Yeah, but that like I said, that doesn't add anything. It doesn't actually add anything to the game.
No, it just changes
in
the
Heavy
way that
Rain's
you
case.
play
It just it creates an illusion that you're actually playing one.
Well, so
instead of playing a visual choose your own adventure.
So,
well, what I'm saying is like that.
I don't understand
you're managing
why
to
this is a
completely miss
bad
like
thing.
the point that Chris and I are making. It's not that the technology can't be used, and in fact, the one like the best example you've come up with happens to be a first-person shooter, which is one of the like two genres of game that movement controller caters to.
That's
like,
why I would say
is
go
perfectly
play
made
Sorcery,
for.
because Sorcery
But something like
was
Heavy
built
Rain
for it.
doesn't add anything to it. It just doesn't.
But it's a different way to play the game, and the preferred method is to use the move controllers.
Are you
I would
telling
say
me the preferred method to play Heavy Rain is a move controller?
Yeah.
To give you an example of what
I
movement
can't
controller does
believe
for
that.
here's an example of what a movement controller does for Heavy Rain. Let's say you have a job. Let's say your job is to make copies. So you go to a copy machine and you make your copies. Well, someone comes along and decides that to make the experience feel like it's more fulfilling, to make the copy, you have to like stick your dick in a hole, waggle your ass, pour coffee on it, and then elbow the motherfucker for every one sheet of paper you want to copy. That's essentially what the move controller does for Heavy Rain. It adds unnecessary amounts of time spent doing something to create the illusion of fulfillment. Like, that's all it does. It doesn't add anything to the game. It doesn't make you think, man, this is nifty. It's just like, man, this would be much easier with a fucking controller. Like, that's the only thought I had the entire time I was watching for like 2-3 hours.
Did you play it?
No, I didn't play it. I didn't have to. I watched like three
No,
other people that are infinitely better at video games than me play it.
I would say play it. I would just play it. There's no reason for you not to. Other than the fact, yes, you may feel from an outside perspective people look stupid, but you're not playing it, so
I'm not saying the fact that they look stupid. I was watching their visible frustration, West. It's like, when you're playing the Wii, you're swinging a golf club to swing a golf club. When you're playing Heavy Rain, you're using that fucking controller to shave a face that you could just use the joystick and a button to do. That would be easier. It's not... And the shaving a face, it's not like there's an analogous action to that. It's not like, man, I felt like I really shaved a face. It's like, well, you can go shave.
Which I was going to say brings me to my next point. Why would anyone think shaving their face is an action that would be fun in a video game?
Okay, so at the beginning of Heavy Rain, they use getting up in the morning to teach you how to interact with the world and the environment that you're about to play in. And the shaving of the face is part of the bathroom routine that's at the beginning of the game. That's why it's in there. It's showing you how to play the game.
All right, you know what that reminds me of? And this isn't exactly accurate, so I'm going to go ahead and state that up front. But it reminds me of people who love the fucking Sims. I fucking can't stand the Sims. You want me to tell you why I can't stand the Sims? Because what the fuck do I want to play a game that just mimics me doing what the fuck I can do in real life? What is the fucking point of that? Get out and do it your goddamn self.
Right.
That shit is fucking annoying as balls to me.
Well, yeah, and that whole morning routine is just at the beginning of the game. It does not repeat because they're doing it in Beyond. I know that much. When they started when they started making it, and because of the format that it's in, the game uses a nighttime routine or a morning routine to teach you what you're supposed to be doing in order to interact with the environment and make decisions and listen to certain things and stuff like that. So get up, get dressed, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's long, it's boring, but by the time you're done with that section, you know what you're supposed to do.
All right, let me ask you this question then. Since it still boggles my mind that, like, out of all of us, you're the person that I would say reads the least. Mm-hmm. But yet you love, like, fucking, like, choose your own adventure book video games. I don't... There's got to be something there I'm missing.
I'm visual. Me and reading doesn't translate the same way.
Anyway. That's not really my point. You played Walking Dead.
Yes, I did.
Said you
loved
that
game.
Right? That's the same type of game, I would argue. It's a choose your own adventure game.
Yep.
Now, I can buy that because it's literally a choose your own adventure game. It's a visual representation of a choose your own adventure book, right? Has very simple controls, I would imagine.
Yeah.
You interact with certain highlighted objects in the environment for the most part.
Yeah.
All right. See, I would prefer just doing it like that because in that case, the experience I want to have is getting the story. Mm-hmm. Right? I don't want fancy controls. The controls are merely almost a wall that are between me and the story that I want to see.
Right.
So why do I want a more complicated than simple? Do you think the Walking Dead video game would be better with a motion controller?
I don't think it would make any difference.
All right. Why is it different for Heavy Rain?
Okay. With Walking, have you played either one of the games?
I've played just a few minutes of Heavy Rain, and I've seen Walking Dead, but I have not played it.
Okay.
But I know games of its type. I played the Back to the Future game by Telltale Games. I imagine it's designed the same way.
Walking Dead is very similar to the Back to the Future game. However, I feel that it's a more stripped down version. Like, you have less interaction with things. At most, you're walking around or you're talking to somebody. That's kind of it. But because of the additional things that Heavy Rain has added in, like when you go up to a door, you have to, and it's got one of the big wheels that has locked it. I forget what those things are called. And you have to turn it. Instead of you pressing a button and it turns it, you've got to like rotate the joystick because that's how they built it. In order to open said lock.
Right. And here's my thing. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, they just.
I played games where they do that before.
Mm-hmm. They took your press a button interaction and replaced it with motion interaction. But the motion interaction on your controller.
But what I don't get, and here's where we're going to diverge probably,
Oh no,
right?
that's fine.
When I play a game, like, and this is true because I've had it in other games that aren't Heavy Rain, and it's still been true. So I'm going to assume that my mind wouldn't change.
Right.
Is that I get really aggravated when I go to a door and like I want to open the door and it makes me jump through the extra hoop of wiggling my fucking joystick around when I could just press the button. It doesn't do anything. It's not like the door's locked. It's not like I have to perform some kind of technical skill to get it open. It's literally they've decided, hey, you know what would be more fun instead of pressing this button, you can move it around because it mimics you turning it. That's just aggravating to me. It's just.
It doesn't add anything to the game, which is what we've been saying the whole time. It doesn't add anything. That changing the way you open the door didn't add anything. All it did was make a lateral shift to the left or the right or up or down or which direction you want to say it. All it was is a lateral shift. It didn't do anything new.
Corey,
there's nothing new about it.
If I'm going to be down next week. If I brought you Heavy Rain and a motion controller, would you try it out?
Oh, sweet God!
If it
would make you,
I'm the best way for me to pose my argument is try them both, and if you still feel the same way, I get it. It's not for everyone, but
I mean, I don't mind trying it. I can't.
I enjoyed it. I felt.
But you played? Did you not play it before? Did you beat the game before the motion controller?
Yeah, I didn't have a motion controller when.
All right,
I
which
got
way
Heavy
did you
Rain.
prefer?
I preferred the motion controller.
Tell me why.
Because like I mentioned, the additional interactions that they placed in. I agree with you that it is a level of frustration if the game does it all the time. But because the game is built more like a movie, when you would be watching a movie and someone would go up to that same door and that particular scene of them trying to open the door and the frustration and the angst that's being put into it is what you're actually doing, then the one time is okay, or the two times, because that's what's important is they're focusing on this.
Okay, so now my question is when it comes to that.
And
is,
part of
so
the
what
game
you're saying is Heavy Rain is
really
successful at it because it's barely a game. It allows you to not have to do these actions repetitively.
Yes.
All right, now
it is structured like a movie.
What if it was a game, an actual game, and you had to do those actions repetitively the entire game?
I would have to see if they accommodated it well. Sorcery is a game where you have to use the motion controller. Like, you cannot use a regular controller because the casting the spells part of it. It would be like you draw a triangle to cast this one spell or to switch over to this one spell, and it might be a wrist flick to throw it, or it might be like an arm cross piece to get it to cast. But when you're doing it, and then again, this also is built into the fantasy realm of I'm playing
I'll let you
child.
keep going, but once you're done, I'll tell you why what you're saying is kind of pointless.
Well, he's going to say it's pointless because the game is specifically made
because
to use a motion controller.
Exactly. You started off by saying the game's made to use a motion controller, which is not what Chris and I have been talking about this entire time. We're talking about the games that are designed where you can use either or, and in 99.99999999999% of all of those games, fucking the motion controller adds nothing. It adds nothing. All it does in some cases is add a layer of frustration. It's like going to the DMV and you think you've got all your paperwork, and then they're like, well, we want this paper too. That's essentially all it does, is add something else that you have to do to accomplish what you want to be able to get the story.
Games it doesn't
if
translate
it's a game
well.
specifically designed around it, I have no issue with it.
Well, there's only been like
I'll
4
just say
games
that I think it's
specifically
gimmicky,
designed. There's only been like 4 or 5 games specifically designed because no studio really stepped into
why
it.
Why is that?
Because no studio stepped into it, really.
Why though? Why? Think about it. Take the leap.
Why not?
I mean, the Wii's a platform where like
you had to, but then again, it was mostly ports. Still. Hello?
I mean, it's not even just that though. I mean, the Wii's a platform where they did it, but the Wii went back to the good old days of like 80% of all the games that came out for it being shit.
Yeah.
And it was because of the fucking controller. Because no serious game company wanted design around the controller.
Although isn't it weird that when they re-released Resident Evil 4 for the Wii, the preferred method for that game became play it on the Wii, because what they've done with the interaction is more interesting than.
See, I always thought the preferred method of playing Resident Evil 4 was on the fucking GameCube.
No, from the reviews that I read, and then again, this may have been bought, but from what the reviews I've read and some people that I've talked to, they preferred playing Resident Evil 4 on the Wii than playing it. I played Silent Hill Shattered Memories on the Wii and on the PlayStation. The Wii interaction was more entertaining and built up more anxiety than trying to play it with a controller, because there is a disconnect when you're doing the physical movement. It helps. I don't know how to explain how it helps other than.
Well, see, all I would say when it comes to
involved.
that tension you're talking about, to me that sounds like the tension exists because you as a human being, when you get tense and get nervous, it's a hell of a lot harder for you to control something through motion than it is pressing a button.
Yeah.
Well, that goes back to the gimmicky thing of it again. All that does is allow you to make a subpar video game and then mask how it's subpar by adding that layer of movement. Like, oh, hey, here's a subpar video game, but we'll add this nifty little gimmick in, and then you're like, oh, well, that's kind of cool because I get to kind of move stuff around.
It just, the thing I see is like, all right, Jessica and Inslee had a Wii.
Mm-hmm.
And they fucking had, what the shit was it? That damn Resident Evil game that was like a fucking on-rails shooter.
Oh, there's two of them.
Umbrella Chronicles. Yeah, one of those.
Yeah, I've got both of them.
I watched them play that for hours, and it was just an act of attrition.
Mm-hmm.
Just pure attrition.
Yeah. Well,
Like,
and when it comes to rail shooters, the first-person shooters, I'd rather play it on the Move than the Wii, because the Wii is inaccurate as shit, whereas the Move actually does 1-to-1. So I stand behind the one or the Move.
See, but
for that.
you keep saying 1-to-1, but I mean,
It's a 1-to-1 movement. So because it's using a camera to track a ball of light instead of using an RF receiver, the camera is translating the actual movement within the movable space as where you're supposed to be placing it on the screen. So if I'm moving forward, it can see that instead of it trying to translate that something.
That just brings a whole nother issue into it, because then it's based on the placement of the camera. Because with the IR sensor automatically translates it to where it would be on screen based on what you're doing. Whereas with the camera, it's based around where you have the camera positioned. You know, how high you are, how tall you are, how low it is, what angle you're at.
The camera's not that hard to set up. It's really just you place it on.
But see, every game wants it different, though. That's the thing that's crazy,
well,
right?
No,
All right,
no.
For instance,
no.
what's the fucking what the hell's that dance game that's out now?
Dance Dance Revolution?
No, not
Just
Dance Revolution.
Zumba?
Just Dance. That's
Just
it.
Dance.
That wants the camera at, I can't remember. One of them wants it at like 20 inches from the floor.
Oh.
And then the other game wants it sitting up, looking down on you.
Oh, I know it. Okay, so there's the Pets game. I forget what that game's exactly called. But there's a Pets game where you use the Move controller to pet this virtual friend.
God, that sounds gay.
Yeah, it does. And the Spellbook one, that requires, because you place the book on the floor and then you point the camera at the book. And then
I do remember that. Now, I will say the one thing I thought was kind of an interesting use, and it wasn't even motion control. It was the damn camera they used, the PlayStation Eye.
Yeah.
The damn what was the one that was like the weird ass interactive like card game?
Oh, that was the third one. Battle Eye or something like that.
Battle something. See that I'll give them credit for trying to make something different there. You know.
Oh yeah,
like
the game
but,
actually.
But
Because
the problem was, once again, no one bought it and no one played it because you had to have 38 peripherals to make it work.
I went back to go try and look into that game, and just to play it and see if I could find like a mat and some cards to fuck around with and a disc. Went searching online. That game got really popular for a while. It just
And then it did.
well, and then it lost support. Like it got popular like Yu-Gi-Oh or something does. Like everybody was into it, and then they moved on. So unfortunately, that game is dead in water. So unless you already have everything and a friend, you can't really play it. But
I'd
those
argue
are,
if you have everything, you probably don't have any friends.
Yeah.
So.
But there's only been a handful of games that require you to move the camera. Everything else has been if your television's set really high, place it underneath. If your television's set really low, place it on top, and just kind of point the camera. Other than that, it's using every game kind of starts with like hit one corner of the television, hit the bottom corner of the television, so that it can see where its box is, and then let's continue going. And that's it. There's a small setup so that the camera can register where everything is, but it's not that big of an issue. The biggest issue I've had is trying to use the Move to control the menu, because that thing is touchy as hell. You just
and that's my thing, right? I mean, I'm not. Mm-hmm. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not some person that's like, no, never do anything new. But my thing is, at the juncture we're at today, even with the great stride that the Kinect has made, because the new Kinect is arguably the most accurate thing of its type ever made.
It is at the moment.
But
for what it does, yeah.
We're just not to a point yet where the technology and the ability for people to make games that use the technology in interesting ways makes it worth having. For instance, the touchpad that's on the PlayStation 4 controller. It's a neat little thing, but at the moment, unless somebody does something crazy with it, it's really just an extra button that can be used as a gimmick.
Yeah.
For instance, in Assassin's Creed 4, you click it and it brings up the map.
Yep.
And then you can move around the map with your finger, just like you would on your fucking Android phone on Google Maps or whatever. Right. You can pinch, zoom, and all that type stuff. I still rather use I literally, and I'm not exaggerating because I have played this. Mm-hmm. You know, I tried it a couple of times. Like, oh, that's kind of neat, and then I immediately went back to using the fucking joystick because the joystick is a lot more accurate.
Well, you're right. I'm never gonna say all the games are gonna translate well. Like Little Big Planet, I thought that game would be great with the Move. It's terrible. It sucks. I hate it.
I couldn't even imagine playing a fucking platformer with a goddamn motion controller. I would kill myself.
There's a Little Big Planet Prehistoric Moves. That game's not that bad.
I know, but still.
Well, it's a 2-person requirement. One person uses the Move controller, one person uses your standard controller. And the person with the Move control, they have to work together to get through all the levels.
Oh Lord, what a horrible idea!
I would say it's better for kids than it would be adults.
Right, and I'll buy that because nobody else would want to put themselves to that.
Yeah, the game's not bad. It's not good. It's different. I've played it a little bit. Not that impressed by it. It's just Little Big Planet with an extra element of annoyance. But I would say, there's a game that the company Little Big Planet is working on, and questionable.
Media Molecule, that's the game.
Yeah,
their name, by the way.
Media Molecule, yes. They're working on something, and I don't. Did you watch the PlayStation 4?
The reveal thing.
Yeah,
I watched
the big 2-hour piece.
Yeah.
That what they're working on with that modeling system is brilliant. I have no idea how you translate that into a game, but that's brilliant. And maybe it's like a draw the connectors to get a ball from one side to the other, and you've got to get it to hit a curved line so it gets enough
what
distance.
Was that damn? They did a game. What's the game they did where you have to draw your They did Scribble Knots. That's not what I'm talking about. They did a game where you have to draw and throw the shit in there. I can't remember what it's called.
It got really popular on phones for a while, but it was hard.
Draw something.
No, Draw Something's that Pictionary game.
Where
you play with friends. But no, I know what game
Fist
you're
can
talking
draw.
about, and that game was really good. It was really hard because it had a bunch of physics and creativity factor going in, playing in it, and I think only a handful of people actually got pure enjoyment out of it because you had gravity working with the fact that it identified a line that and what the curve of it was, so how much momentum would have been based off of the gravity that's in that. It's fucking weird. But the people who created it are brilliant and were able to make that.
I just realized Chris isn't here.
Thomas?
Yeah.
Oh, shit. Huh. Well, I'm going to have to cut 45 minutes out of this recording. I'm going to cut the entire move conversation out and set that aside as just a long talk.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can break it in half and then just use it as a separate thing. I mean, because think about it. When they do radio shows and shit like that, right, in the Morning West, you know, a lot of times they go way past what they're doing, and you know, they just cut it and start it the next day, or they just talk about stuff as it pops up.
Oh,
so, I mean,
well,
you know,
at about an hour, we shifted to the whole, move and the move controllers and all that, and that's all we've been talking about for the past 45 minutes. So, that'll be nice. But I don't disagree with you guys that the move and the connects and all of this, it's not the best thing on the planet, but it does add a different level of interaction.
I'm not against them. I just have no reason to use them until they make some reason for me to use them. Is what I'm saying.
Well, and that's why I would say go play Sorcery, because that game was built for them, and that game's really fun with it. It's the same idea as when you're a kid, you go pick up a stick and you're like, boom, I'm gonna blow you up. Then again, we grow into adults, and now we don't have to use our imagination. We have something to control and then cast spells at, and it's a cool factor to it. It allows your imagination to have an actual existence other than, I had this idea. It's like, okay, so you mean I get to do this and this happens? That's cool. It's different. It's not easier. It's just different. And just because things are easy doesn't make them better, right?
Well, no, I mean, as of right now, it's just basically, I don't know. I mean, it's just something nifty to play with.
Yeah, and that's why I own it. That and rail shooters.
But
I own it because it's something nifty, and every once in a while something comes out for the move or has come out for the move, and I'm like, well, let's see how this is with it. And I sit down and I go to play it, and sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. The sports games, I prefer the ones on the move than the ones on the Wii, except for tennis. The tennis one on Wii is fun. But the rail shooters, move only. I love rail shooters. They're just fun. I wish more companies ported them over to the systems. Because right now we've got House of the Dead, we've got the Resident Evil Chronicles, we've got...
Of course, the only issue there is that rail shooters just suck. They're just horrible games.
It's a really good game when you're drunk.
Yes, that's not really a glowing recommendation. This game's only good when you're drunk.
You're right. It's simple entertainment, and sometimes simple entertainment's okay. But House of the Dead, the unrated version, the one that's done like a bad horror movie, like a grindhouse movie. That game's hilarious, and it's worth playing just to get that ridiculous factor done. And like I said, those games are normally boring until you have that rifle in your hand, and then the game's better. Yeah, it's a different method to play it, but just like you said about Rocksmith and Rock Band and all of that, those games, if you just had to be pressing buttons, they would have been boring as shit. But once you got that different controller, it felt different, so you were able to connect with it a bit better.
Well, yeah, the only issue there, once again, though, is that I'd argue with Rock Band or Guitar Hero or what have you, that the only way to really play them is with their specific controller. I mean, you know, the only reason the other way exists is simply because, you know, the inputs have to go somewhere, and when you don't have the controller come in, they go to the default controller.
Yep.
But
Well, and they also made it for the what's it called, the like DS.
yeah, with the little weird handheld thing you put on your shit. Yeah, that's kind of shitty too. I mean, you know.
But at that point, they had made so much success that they could have just thrown something out there. Like
Yeah, and that's why they killed their brand. I mean, that's
DJ Hero, the keyboard. Actually, I've heard the keyboard was kind of worth it. The drum set from Rock Band was worth it because it was which I think this is partly what spawned Rocksmith into being a reality. Is that you could actually learn how to play the drums from that drum kit.
right. Well, I mean, Rocksmith is all about the guitar. You're thinking about like Rock Band 2 or 3 or whatever it was.
3 had the keyboard, I believe.
Yeah.
But like when the drum set first came out, you could actually learn how to roughly play drums off of that. And then the keyboard, Smith came out, and you could learn how to play the guitar off of that. And then
Which I wouldn't actually mind having Rocksmith. That would be sweet as hell. Of course, I'd have to pick me up like an electric guitar, you know, on the cheap from like a pawn shop or whatever.
well, right. I got some
But
friends.
that would be, I think that would be worth it. I mean, you know, because
I don't have the hands to learn guitar.
I don't know that I do either, but I learned how to play one instrument, so I'm assuming I could probably learn to play another.
What instrument do you know?
I can play the trumpet.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, I was in band.
Somehow I knew that, I just didn't realize that you actually played an instrument in band.
Yeah. Now, given could I play it worth a damn now? No, because my muscles are out of shape. Because you literally have to have like build up like mouth and jaw muscles and stuff. Because without it, you sound like shit on a stick.
I don't know, how long would it take you to get back into reasonable?
Probably at least if I did it every day, probably at least several weeks to get my mouth halfway decent back to making the sound it should. Probably a month or so to actually be good.
That's not bad.
Month or two.
Do you still have a trumpet?
Yeah, it's at my mom's house in my closet.
You should pick it back up. Why not? I'm envious of anybody who can play an instrument.
See, I'm envious of anyone who can draw. That's always been one of the things I wish I could do.
With drawing, it's just practice. Number one, you're
Yeah,
always
no, but there's natural skill that's there too.
Well, number one, you're gonna think your work is bad, and everyone's gonna start off poorly. But as you continue to work on it and refine it, you do get better, and your style comes out. The only person that really hates your style is you, and very terrible critics. But
although to be fair, I did for me anyway, I consider it fucking awesome. I did a little sketch up of like a fantasy character when I was bored one day, and of course, like, you know, there's issues with scale on certain parts of his body, you know, Liefeld style. But for me, I was like, man, this is like the best thing I've ever drawn. and one of the things I had to do is I had to realize that there's no way in hell I'm ever gonna be able to draw detail. So I had to go for like a comic booky, you know, kind of exaggerated approach. And not great by any means, but it's like easily a bajillion times.
yeah, I mean, it's understanding what you're capable of and then pressing it and not giving up on it, which is honestly what I think most people do when it comes to drawing. Is they're like, I can't draw because they've tried like a handful of times. See, it's shit. Yeah, did you continue working on it for the next, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years? Well, no, that takes a lot of time. You're absolutely right. So no wonder your drawings look like shit. Well, how long have you been drawing? Since I could pick up a pencil and put it to paper.
Right.
I don't draw all the time, but I draw. My talent is the only reason that I don't have to draw all the time to maintain my a level of skill. But I can still do it because I have muscle memory on how things work, et cetera, et cetera. It's why I spent so much time like drawing faces. If I just sit down to sketch something, it always starts off as a face at a particular angle because I practice that all the time. I was in class in school doodling, but nonetheless, that's what my hand memory is built up to, is to be able to do that. And it's just practice. Most people practice. I would say learning an instrument is harder than it is to draw.
Well, and that's also because you can draw.
Well,
I mean, just like I would say that learning an instrument, depending on the instrument anyway, I won't say all instruments, but certain instruments, it's just a matter of putting the time in.
well, I would agree with you, but I would also say there's a level of I don't know, physical understanding, like that. And when you do this one thing, this sound comes out, and it needs to sound it sounds a particular way. With drawing, you can get away with like murder, and it is accepted. When it comes to sound, if it isn't pleasant, that the instrument is unforgiving. Drawing is very forgiving. You are punished every time you try and play an instrument. You know when you're doing something wrong. And to be able to fix that, you're right, takes a lot of practice, but then again, you can't, other than listening to it, there's nothing to help you adjust, or there's nothing to assist your adjustment, other than you just trying something slightly different. And then again, like you played the trumpet, and I know you have to hold your lips a particular way to produce certain sounds, and certain things are going to change. But if you've been holding your lips wrong the entire time and
You
aren't
can't get it
shown
off, bud.
how to do it properly, then you're never going to sound well.
Right, and far be it for me to say that I'm like the world's greatest trumpeter.
Oh,
I'm
no,
not. But I mean, I could play it and do what I needed to do. There were people that were better than me, but there were
Of
also people
course.
that put in a lot more practice than I did too.
Yeah, of course.
Um,
But I would say it's the same thing. And there are some people that just, like, it boggles my mind when people get instruments. I've seen somebody who got bored, and she was just like, yeah, I learned the accordion. How'd you do that? I just picked it up and started
all right, well,
fiddling with
that's
it.
like Clint, right?
Yeah.
Are you Clint's friend on Facebook?
I think so.
All right, Clint has gone from, like, as near as I could tell, never picking up a guitar, or if he did, not talking about it, to, like, spending, it seems like, every waking hour on the guitar, and, like, becoming, I haven't actually heard him play, but I'm going to assume he's not full of shit, and becoming very good at it, at least based on the knowledge and everything. So, it can happen.
Yeah.
But he made a decision and put the time in, basically.
Well, and the thing that confuses me even more is there's a written code for sound, and I've tried to understand it. I just don't. I don't know what my disconnect is between music and creativity, but I cannot, or I have not been able to understand yet on how you can take a sound and make it sound a particular way. That baffles me. And then you can mix all of these additional sounds to produce this one sound. And still, but I know a producer, and I watched him do his thing, and that's amazing. Because he layered like 36 instruments for this brief second, and it was a lovely, lovely sound. But all those pieces separated just sounded like noise. But when you put them all together,
it's called harmony.
I know. But when you put them all together, you produce this thing, and I understand what's happening. I get it, but I don't know how to do that. Like, my brain just does not translate that. Maybe I haven't been shown correctly, or maybe I haven't invested enough time into it, but I know so many people who know how to play instruments, and I haven't been able to figure it out. I know part of my problem is figuring out that the instrument I want to learn is a rhythm-based, and I don't physically have rhythm. So that makes things difficult. Yep, I'm a white guy. That makes things difficult. But I wish I could play an instrument. I wish I was talented enough to draw and play an instrument. But until someone can show me how to do something with music,
God doesn't give with both hands.
he does to some.
Yeah, that's true.
He does to some. But I would love for someone at some point to show me how to play music and how to structure it and how to, because I think that would be a nice outlet. But I don't understand it. And it's probably why I have so much respect for people who can make it and then produce with these wonderful albums and all of these things. That's amazing to me. I wish.
And I wish upon a star.
And people who can sing, because let's face it, the only thing I'm going to get away with is being in a
I
punk
sure
band.
shit can't do that.
No, you just proved that.
Haha.
Haha, fucker. So you're listening to the Nerd Method podcast with West and...
Chris.
Yay, you got it this time. You can get in touch with us on... Fuck, what's the email? I forgot. You forgot too!
Let me make sure I know what it is without fucking it up. I have it on my phone.
I believe it is nerdmethodpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, methodpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, just email us if you want to talk to us.
You might want to re-record that. That's a clusterfuck failure right there.
I think it's a nice intro. I really think it's a nice intro.